Why, hello everyone, Brian here. I hope this finds you all well. We are getting into John chapter 6 today. Pretty excited about it. It is a lengthy chapter, about 71 verses long, so we're going to break this up into 6 different sections as we go through. And so today we're going to go verses 1 through 15. So let's go ahead and let's get into it. After this, Jesus went away to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, which is the Sea of Tiberias. And a large crowd was following him because they saw the signs that he was doing on the sick. Jesus went up on the mountain, and there he sat down with his disciples. Now the Passover, the feast of the Jews, was at hand. Lifting up his eyes then, and seeing that a large crowd was coming toward him, Jesus said to Philip, "Where are we to buy bread, so that these people may eat?" He said this to test him, for he himself knew what he would do. Philip answered him, 200 denarii worth of bread would not be enough for each of them to get a little. One of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, said to him, "There is a boy here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish, but what are they for so many?" Jesus said, "Have the people sit down." Now there was much grass in that place, so the men sat down, about 5,000 in number. Jesus then took the loaves, and when he had given thanks, he distributed them to those who were seated, so also the fish, as much as they wanted. And when they had eaten their fill, he told his disciples, "Gather up the leftover fragments, that nothing may be lost." So they gathered them up and filled 12 baskets with fragments from the 5 barley loaves left by those who had eaten. When the people saw the sign that he had done, they said, "This is indeed the prophet who has come into the world." Perceiving then that they were about to come and take him by force to make him king, Jesus withdrew again to the mountain by himself. All right, so this chapter is pretty significant in John's gospel for the fact that this is really the only chapter that deals with Jesus's mission to the area of Galilee, which was kind of like his home area, and where the majority of his actual 3.5-year mission took place. The synoptic gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, they deal almost primarily in Jesus' mission in Galilee, but here John doesn't. Most of Jesus' mission that he writes about here is in Judea, which is quite a bit different than Matthew, Mark, and Luke. So chapter 6 is really the only chapter we have here where he's speaking about his Galilean ministry. Now, our big thing with this section here today is this is the only miracle of Jesus's, other than his resurrection, that is recorded in every single gospel. It is in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, the feeding of the 5,000 men. And so this was very significant to his disciples, that John, knowing that it was written in those other gospels, he still decided to include it. Why? Probably because of what's coming up in verse 35, which we'll get to here in a couple passages, when Jesus says, "I am the bread of life." And so this is an example of a sign that Jesus does is going to be linked with his teaching. And so Jesus, after this takes place, he's going to go into this lengthy, detailed teaching of what this sign and this miracle actually means and what we should get out of it. So this passage also tells us that this was the Passover. This was the time of the Passover. And so this is the second Passover in John's Gospel so far. The first one took place in chapter 2. This is the second one, and then the third one will come later on when Jesus is crucified. So we can see from this that this is about halfway through Jesus's ministry right here, which gives us a great kind of time frame and reference. So what's going on here? Jesus has a huge crowd. It says a large crowd, 5,000 men, probably, most scholars say, probably between 15 and 20,000 people following him because of women and children. They just counted men back then is what they did. So 15 to 20,000 people following Jesus. That is a huge amount, right? That's a huge amount. That's like the size of, I don't know what like Woodburn's at now these days, but like everyone in Woodburn following Jesus. Can you imagine that? And so Jesus sees this huge crowd and he's like, what are we going to do here? they don't have enough to eat. They were just coming after him to see his miracles. Now, these weren't actually all like disciples or followers of Jesus. It says that they had seen the signs he was doing on the sick, and so they wanted to see him more for his celebrity than to actually follow him as Lord, and there's a big difference there. They just wanted to be around the celebrity. And so Jesus says, where are we going to get enough bread? And it says he said this to Philip just to kind of, in a way, test him, because he already knew what he was going to do. And then Andrew comes along and says, oh, well, here's this little boy. He's got 5 barley loaves, which were just these little loaves of bread, like for one person, and 2 fish, which also would have been really small. It would have been like a Happy Meal for one person. Yet Jesus takes it and multiplies it so that he feeds these 20,000 people. And not only that, it says that there were 12 baskets left over that they picked up and kept. Now, it's actually been taught by people that no miracle took place here, and they actually say that Jesus just divvied up all the food that was there and everyone shared it. And this is actually just a nice little story about sharing, and no miracle actually took place. That's false. And quite frankly, if you teach that, or if you've heard anybody teach that, you should leave that church. And that person should never be able to teach the Bible again, because they have missed the point entirely. Yet, what so many people do, they try to take the supernatural out of what is clearly supernatural in the Bible and try to make it more accommodating to the general public. But we don't need to do that. If Jesus created the world by his sheer will, quite easily he could take 5 barley loaves and 2 fish and multiply it into feeding 20,000 people, into feeding the entire world if he wanted to. So let's take a couple points out of this. Yet again, we see that Jesus fulfills a need here. These people are without food, but they have followed him, and he has sympathy on them, and so he feeds them. And this is always what Jesus does. When there is a need, whether someone's sick or dead or hungry, he meets their need. He has mercy on them, and he meets their need. And that is exactly what we see here. And quite frankly, here we get a glimpse of the kingdom of heaven. Jesus said when he came that the kingdom of heaven is at hand. And now the kingdom of heaven is kind of a bizarre kind of concept in the Bible, because Jesus says that the kingdom of heaven is at hand, and yet it is still coming. And what he meant by that is that in his presence, when Jesus had come to the earth, the kingdom of heaven had come. Why? Because the king had come. He is the king. And so Jesus brought the kingdom of heaven with him. And so throughout his ministry, we see these little glimpses of the kingdom of heaven, where there is no hunger because Jesus feeds everyone. There is no sickness because Jesus heals everyone. And there is no death because Jesus raises people from the dead. Yet it is not complete because there is still sickness and hunger and death in the world, right? And so with Jesus, we get this glimpse into the kingdom of heaven, the kingdom of God, but it's not yet complete. And that will come completed when Jesus comes back again to set up his literal kingdom here on earth, where there will be no more sickness, no more death, no more suffering, no more hunger. The other big point here is there's a reference to how many baskets were left over, and it says there was 12 baskets that they picked up. Now, this is a really big number in the Bible, 12. There were 12 tribes of Israel. And so the point that is probably being drawn out here is that Jesus has enough. There is even enough left over from what he does, what he brings to the world, to provide for all of Israel, for all of the 12 tribes of Israel, is his point here. And then in the Synoptic Gospels, we're told of another feeding where they pick up 7 baskets full of food. And 7 in the Bible is this number that means perfection or completeness. And so first, it says that they pick up 12 baskets, so there's enough left over for all of Israel. But then the second time when they pick up the 7, what's that mean? It means that there is enough for everyone. There is enough for the entire world with Jesus, that he provides for everyone, and he can provide for everyone. He is enough. So Jesus always provides for the needy, and we see that here. Next thing we see here is Jesus is not about fame. They go and they want to make him king. They want to make him king. This is 5,000 men here, okay? 20,000 people, 5,000 men who, because it is the Passover, and this is this time of, you could think of it like a 4th of July here times a million, where we kind of have this like nationalistic pride at 4th of July and everyone's flying their flags. Passover was that time for the Jewish people. So it's already a heightened sense of nationality and pride for the Israelites. And now here is this man who's doing these incredible things, and they want to prop him up and make him king and start a revolution to overthrow the Romans right here and now. And what does Jesus do? He goes away by himself on the mountain to pray to God the Father. And so we see this throughout Jesus' ministry. He's not about the fame. Never is he about the fame. 5,000 men could do a lot. That's like, how many men are there in Silverton? There's probably about 5,000 men in Silverton. Now, if each one of us got together and formed an army to try to overthrow a town, we might have some luck there. This is not a small thing. But yet Jesus walks away from it. He wants nothing to do with it. Now, there was someone else who wanted to make Jesus king before the proper time. And we see this in Matthew 4, and it's actually the devil. Satan himself comes down and tempts Jesus in the wilderness. And he says this in verse 8. Again, the devil took him to a very high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their glory. And he said to him, all these I will give you if you will fall down and worship me. Then Jesus said to him, begone, Satan, for it is written, you shall worship the Lord your God, and him only shall you serve. Then the devil left him, and behold, angels came and were ministering to him. Jesus is not like us. We kind of crave power. We crave popularity. We crave all these things, and we even see it in Christian circles. Not how Jesus is. There are numerous times before his life ends that people want to rise up and make him king and make him a ruler, and every time he says no. Why? Because Jesus knew exactly why he came to the earth, and it was not to become a king the first time. It was not to conquer the Romans. That was not his purpose. His whole purpose was to come and conquer sin and death on the cross. And if they would have raised him up and made him king, he would not have been able to do that. But he had his eyes on one goal only, and that was to go to the cross and to die for the sins of mankind on that cross. And so Jesus trades this crown of gold that they want to give him for a crown of thorns. And instead of being lifted up high on some glorious throne, Jesus is lifted high on his throne, which is a cross. And there up on the cross, the king sat on his throne with a crown full of thorns on his head in all glory. That was Jesus' glory when he came to earth the first time, was the cross. Now the second time when he comes, he will be wearing a crown of gold, and it will be to conquer, to set up his literal kingdom here on earth. And we really see Jesus' heart here. Who does he go running to? They want to make him king, and he goes off by himself to talk to God, to pray. We see this throughout Jesus' ministry, to get alone and to pray to God the Father, because that was more important to him than being a king. That was more important to him than any fame or success or anything like that. It was to be by himself in relationship to the Father. So that really needs to drive our lives. First and foremost, it is about our relationship to God, our relationship to Jesus? Are we seeking them out all the time in prayer through the reading of the Word? This is God speaking to us through His words for us today. And I can't tell you how many times I have gone to God and I've had questions and I've prayed about all these things and I don't know what to do in my life. And I'll just start reading the Word and it'll just come to me through reading this. This is God's will for us today, stated perfectly for us. And He still speaks to us through His Word. What we see in Jesus is that going to the Father in solidarity, that was His comfort. That's where He found His comfort, was in relationship to God the Father. And so it should be with us. Our comfort should be in God alone, not in food, not in money, not in drink, not in anything like that, not in being comfortable, just flat out being comfortable. But our comfort should be in God and God alone. I've just got to tell you from my life, there is no greater comfort than in God. It doesn't matter how much money I'm making or anything like that. I've had times when it's been hard to pay bills. And I've had times where it's not, where we have extra money left over. But the one constant is God. It didn't matter if we didn't have enough money to pay the bills. He always came through and He made it work. And really, it doesn't matter. You could take away the house, you could take away whatever we have, and I'll still be comfortable because I have God. I have a relationship with Him, and that is just the best thing. It is invaluable. It is priceless. It is like a treasure bearing in a field that someone would go and sell everything they have to go buy that field just to own that treasure. That is what it means to have a relationship with God. It is so beyond any price we can put on it. Because that relationship will never, ever end. And it just brings perfect contentment in this life. Now, I'll tell you what, when I've been seeking my comfort in money, when I seek my comfort in other things, that's when my life is a mess. But when I truly just focus on my relationship to God, through prayer and the reading of the Word, and knowing that He is enough, it sets everything up perfectly in my life. Because He is on the throne and everything else is below. That's exactly the way it should be.